So I want to start with psychology, with the question. So how does it make you feel that you're now in a learning and development role?
Right. You need the longer couch for me to really stretch out to answer that question.
No, but to sort of tell us that journey. So how did you end up in this role? When you obviously had an interest in psychology and went and got a degree in OD, psych. So how did that lead you to this particular role, and what do you think that background brings to your work now?
It's, I'm one of those people who I've been in this field my whole career. And in college, I identified I really enjoyed psychology and understanding what makes people tick, how do people work together, how do you optimize that? And then I like business. How do you make money? How do you figure out markets and sectors and the commercial side of things? And kind of being pragmatic, I said, all right, how can I glue those together? So I got into the field of industrial organizational psychology, or IO psychology, which is the question of how people work together in groups. So for me, the fundamental question for the work that I try to do is to say, because we work in teams at Deloitte, because all of your organizations, people are working in teams, how do you make those environments the best they could be to produce the best outcome that you can? So I have a thread in my career of trying to look at learning from a systemic perspective and to think about all the levers we can pull to create behavior change versus looking at just one or two that might be in front of us today.
Yeah. So you said something interesting when we did a phone call a few weeks ago about how systems create behavior. And I think we all tend to think, especially as Americans, that we're individuals and we're the ones who drive our individual agendas. But this idea that systems create behavior is sort of an important one. So I wonder if you can explain a little bit about that.
Sure. I think we all can think of things in our personal lives that create behavioral outcomes that we are maybe consciously and less consciously aware of. If you think about the current debate in our country right now in terms of the healthcare system or in terms of the tax system, all those things, the incentives they create behavioral outcomes that people adopt to or subscribe to. And it's much the same in organizations, that we set up learning systems, or we set up performance systems, or we set up incentive systems, and those systems create outcomes. Sometimes those are positive outcomes, sometimes those are outcomes we didn't necessarily predict. And I think what's kind of sober about a systemic view is that a lot of times the outcomes we think we're going to create with a system that we put in place are not what really happens down the road. And we at Deloitte have been trying to be responsible around that and thinking, how can we pilot and test our way to success on learning and on some of these performance and talent management questions, because we frankly don't always know how it's going to go. So we want to be careful about what we put into the system and adjust it over time to make that happen.
So let's staying on that systems point. Deloitte over the last year and a half, 2 years, has done away with its performance management, so the traditional performance management review. And I think a lot of companies have kind of taken up that call to sort of break down and do away with this traditional process that nobody really likes. So I wonder if you can kind of give us a little bit of background on that movement within Deloitte, what spurred it, what are the results, and most importantly, how did it change how you develop people, and what was that conversation like as you started to rework this system of performance management?
I'll try to make this not a 3-hour answer to your question. Are those folks in the audience, anybody working on performance management or kind of tangentially adjacent to performance management?
Looks like maybe about 10, 15.
Yeah. It's a tough one. It's a real tough one. And why is it so tough? I think it's so tough because everybody believes they have the right answer. And everybody believes that the way they grew up is the way it worked for them. So the way it worked for them must be the way it will work for somebody else. So Deloitte got started in 2013 with redoing our performance management system. For us, there were a number of pieces of our business case. One was that we've talked a lot about publicly is we assessed, it's an accounting firm to start with, right? So we assessed how many hours do we actually use in our performance management system. We found out across the US alone, on our 80,000 employee base, we spend about 1.8 million hours a year just on performance management. So that makes performance management the single largest project at Deloitte due to the size of the hours investment. And when you quantify that against our average bill rate, you can imagine it's an enormous number. that the firm was effectively paying an opportunity cost every year. So that was one part of our business case. The other part of our business case was nobody really liked it. Our people didn't like it because you have that once-a-year conversation. You go in feeling nervous, you come out feeling bad. And our business leaders didn't really like it because they sat in rooms having conversations about people, and I would say, I won't say fighting amongst each other, that's an overreach, but challenging one another on individual rankings and ratings that didn't necessarily produce an outcome for the person that was developmental. So our system, which really hinges upon much more frequent connection between team leaders and team members, a more reliable way to measure each individual's performance using some very simple data questions, as well as a team engagement tool that we deploy out into the field, is the foundation of the Deloitte system. In terms of results, we've seen for those folks who are in the new system versus the old system, because it's been a piloted model over time, there's a significant, hugely significant difference in terms of those individuals' engagement level as assessed by a reliable metric. We've seen the more you check in with your boss, the more engaged you are, and the more engaged you are, the better you're seen to be performing. So this is that HR value chain that we keep chasing, and, the checking in with each other, engagement, performance. So we're seeing really good outcomes at the engagement and performance level, which we've been working on for, as I said, 5 years. We're at the point now where we're 100% rolled out in the US, and then our total firm population across the globe is about 250,000. So we're about 170, 180,000 into that population by now. So it's a big piece of work.
So how did that change the learning approach then? I mean, because it's obviously a big change management process, but it's also got to change coaching conversations, how you develop leaders for these. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, 2 points there. One point is we chose not to use a big formal learning intervention as a change tool. And the second point is we chose to use a strengths-based leadership approach as the foundation for the whole thing. So I guess I'll take strengths first. Where our system came from in the very beginning was research we had done starting in 2010, 2011 on what makes up the most high-performing teams at Deloitte. And that study, we took our 60 most high-performing teams as judged by our CEOs. We just asked them, who are our most high-performing teams in your eyes? And it could be because they're profitable, innovative, sustainable, whatever the reasons are. And they gave us a mixed bag, a list of teams. And we assessed those teams on a set of questions against a sample, a random stratified sample. And we found the things that were the big differences between our most effective teams and our normal teams. And at Deloitte, we have great teams, so they're already high performing, but normal versus the absolute best. And the number one thing that stood out as a difference between the incredible, awesome teams and the normal teams was the folks on those awesome teams get to use their strengths every day. They perceive they're using their strengths every day. So that's been the foundation of our kind of development change around performance management, is to convert from a, I would say, less integrated leader development approach to one that's really centered on the number one thing we do at Deloitte is help people figure out what their strengths are and how they can deploy them in the work they're doing today, and how they can migrate their jobs over time to be something that fulfills them even more. So that's been a finding that's been really foundational to the work, and I would advise everybody in the room, when you think about big changes like this, getting a really juicy piece of data, even though it's really hard and expensive to build it up front, getting that big juicy piece of data and using it over time has given us incredible credibility with the business to push that change. Then the second point on development is we chose not to use a big formal learning intervention to do it, and frankly, we chose to roll it out without significant formal development. I was out at a client a couple years ago, and they said, that seems like kind of a risky choice, and Deloitte's kind of a risk-averse place, which is true. And why did you make that decision? And I think the best answer I can come up with, we thought we were good enough. We thought we were good enough to pull off this system, to trust our managers and teams to make this happen in a way that wouldn't be frankly perfect, but would be substantially better than the prior state. And that's what's happened. It's substantially better and it's not perfect. So now we have integrated into all of our milestone development programs a strength-based focus and a focus on performance management. And we've also put out, Nadine's in the room here from Deloitte, who's helped us put out a number of micro-learning and individualized development approaches to kind of give more pinpoint solutions to people who have roles in the system over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so staying on that point too, I think that idea about, the risk you took in not using a formal learning program. That sounds a little bit like sacrilege if you're in a traditional CLO role. It's like,
right.
This is a big corporate-wide initiative, organization, firm-wide initiative with a big, target on it. Take the opportunity to, do something big from an L&D perspective, but you kind of scaled it back. And that relates to something that you and I were also talking about, how the fact that you've put a bit of an informal freeze on learning hours on employees. And again, that's something that is maybe not what most CLOs would think to do in a situation like yours. Can you talk about what was the sort of the background and why take that approach?
Sure, and I wouldn't say that everyone at Deloitte would share this exact perspective, but at Deloitte right now we create about 5 million learning hours a year in total for all of our 80,000 practitioners in the U.S. That's a lot of hours, even more than our performance management hours. And my personal view is that's plenty. That's plenty of hours to be in the system that create all the good outcomes that we have, and it should be much more about how do we redeploy and redistribute those hours against our priorities instead of creating new hours to do new things. So when we came around to performance management, we have significant governance around performance management with our businesses, and there really wasn't energy. There wasn't energy to create new hours on this because we've reached that saturation point. So it's been about challenging the total team to say, how do we use what we have today and get rid of some of the old stuff and bring in the new. We've tried to adopt this Essentialism Mindset, which is a book a number of us have read, which basically says, stop trying to add to your plate, just get stuff off your plate so you can make room for new things. Yeah. So it's been a good limiter. I love using constraint at work because it gets rid of some of the BS and lets you really focus on what's important.